If I look a bit like a hot mess, it's because I'm on the tail end, or please, I hope it's the tail end of being sick. About Tuesday, I came down with something pretty nasty, and it put me down hard. I've been stuck in bed watching a lot of Star Trek Voyager, which is fun, but also going through multiple boxes of tissues. And I've been going a little stir crazy, and so here I am in this room for the first time in a couple of days talking to the camera, which I suppose is a pretty good indication that I'm coming out the other side of whatever this is. But that's thrown a pretty big wrench in the schedule of videos. Normally when I do videos or projects, I go through them on a bit of a rotation so I don't burn out. And the rotation was lining up such that the next video would have been on the G15 or on the UE1. And I can't do either of those in this state. For the G15, I really want to get Lloyd back down here because he's been here every step of the way. And as we push that behemoth across the finish line, I really want him to be here for it. But I am very contagious. I don't want to give Lloyd whatever it is that I've got. So we're going to hold off on that until I'm feeling much better and I'm not expelling contagion out of my mouth every time I sneeze or cough. For the UE1, I actually did a bit of design work. I've come up with a block that I'm going to machine up, and it's how we're going to mount all the photodiodes and how the paper tape is going to roll through, and I think it's going to work perfectly. So I'm ready to start throwing aluminum into the milling machine out there and making chips. But that's something you absolutely should not do when you're loopy from being on all sorts of cold medicine or just being sick in general, because that's a good way to end up with a lot of blood, not inside your body, but outside of your body where it's not supposed to be. So we're not going to do either of those things in this episode. And instead, we're going to talk about something completely different. In a previous episode, I actually had this little guy here sitting on top of the Centurion printer here in the background. And I got a ton of comments of people asking what this is. And well, this is a Texas Instruments Insight Series 10 personal information terminal. This is the cutest, coolest looking little data terminal I've ever seen in my life. And it was very kindly donated by Boxcar Jim over on the Discord. He actually met me at VCF Southwest and showed me a couple of pictures and said, hey, I've got these really cool things. Would you be interested in them? And I said, absolutely. I'm a bit of a Texas Instruments fanboy anyways. And so seeing this was just mind-blowing, because I knew that Texas Instruments had made some terminals, but I didn't know they made anything this adorable. This thing is just so cute. So we're going to take a bit of a look at this today, and we're going to hopefully plug it in and get it working. And as far as I know, this thing works at 100%. So there's no repairs or anything that's going to need to be done. It's just a bit of an exploratory episode. So let's get in close on this thing and see what it's doing. Of course, we can't talk about this data terminal without talking about this absolutely adorable little CRT on a pedestal here that you can kind of aim around and point in different directions. It's just the most perfect late 70s, early 80s aesthetic, and I absolutely adore it. The keyboard itself is a pretty standard looking keyboard, and if we pull off the break and escape key here, you can see it is a fully mechanical keyboard, and it actually feels pretty good to type on. Sounds pretty clicky, but not too bad. So I think this would be a pretty good terminal to use, although there's very little information on the internet out there about what this terminal is. But of course it's on Terminals Wiki. There's a couple of pictures of it, a little blurb, and there's a link to a very short article in a magazine, which I have printed out right here, that says TI launches personal information terminals. And there's some pretty good information in here. It says the first model in TI's projected Insight Series 10 stands 12 inches high and displays 24 rows of 40 characters on a 5.5-inch swivel CRT screen. And that makes sense. This is a tiny little screen, so if you did actually 80 columns on here, it would be pretty much unreadable. So a 40 by 24 makes perfect sense for this size of CRT here. The Series 10 comes with an RS-232C interface and communicates at 300 bits per second in asynchronous, full duplex, or echoplex mode. So it is a 300 baud only terminal, which is pretty slow, but that actually does make a bit of sense if we read on here. It says the Series 10 has a built-in modem in was designed for use by non-technical personnel. The operator can plug the terminal into a standard wall telephone jack and a standard telephone, flipping a talk/data switch when the phone is needed for voice conversations. And so that makes perfect sense at 300 baud. That's what most modems were running at the time. So this is a data terminal that you would keep at home, and you would use it to remotely connect to a larger scale system at the office, like the Centurion back there, or maybe even a PDP-11. But this talk data switch, I think, is really cool. You can flip this back and forth between data to use the data terminal or talk to use the telephone. That is a really cool feature. The only other switch on here is right over here, and this is just a standard power switch, I believe. To the right and upper side of the keyboard here is this little door with a flap on it, and you can push that open, and there's a card edge connector down there on the bottom. So this would take little cartridges like a video game console, I think, but that's not what they were used for. This article is full of awesome information, and it says that's called a command module. The operator may employ an optional command module that stores as many as 8 pre-recorded functions with 32 characters per function. Recorded keystrokes can then be transmitted automatically when the operator depresses the function key and any one of the 8 numeric keys to activate a particular function. So if you needed to bootstrap a system, or you had a specific logon that needed to be done, you could just hit function 2 or function 3 and it would run that pre-recorded series of keystrokes to log you into the system fully, so that way you didn't have to memorize and type it all in. That's a pretty cool feature. I don't have the command module, but for what we're doing, that's absolutely not necessary. This is a beautiful little data terminal, but before we open it up, let's spin it around here and take a look at the ports on the back. Back here, it's your pretty standard fare. You've got just your sticker here that says it's the Insight Series 10. We're at 120 volts, 0.4 amps, 30 watts, so it's a pretty low power device, which is pretty awesome to see. There's our part number and our serial number for anybody that's curious. Looks like this one is serial number 93. Have no idea how many of these made, but that's a pretty low number. Like most data terminals, we have 2 DB25 connectors on the back here. One of these is probably going to be for connecting up to RS-232C, and the other one's going to be connecting up to probably like a local printer. This is a pretty standard thing on data terminals from this era. Right next to that, we have 2 phone jacks. Like the article said, one of these is going to be for plugging into the wall, and it's really hard to see, but embossed right here says wall on it, and this one says set. So this one's going to go into the wall, this one's going to go into a telephone, but I don't have a landline anymore, so we're not going to use those. Over here, again, really hard to see, it says local copy on and off. So that's going to be our full duplex and our half duplex setting right there. Other than that, there's really not much else to it. So let's crack it open and take a look at the inside and see what makes this thing tick. The CRT just pops right off the top by pulling upwards on it. It is connected to the base plate still, so I'll just set it upside down next to it for now. The connection is through a simple little RJ11 plug that is super easy to access. Then to get it open, there are just 2 screws on the back side and 1 more screw on top under where the CRT was connected. It's a smart way of hiding the screws while keeping serviceability relatively easy. With all 3 screws removed, the top cover just rotates forward and comes right off. The keyboard surround is sandwiched in place by the top cover, so it can just lift straight up and off without actually having to undo any screws. And finally, the keyboard itself can just rotate out of the way. Serviceability on this thing is stunningly good. I'm so glad I decided to open this up because this is really cool inside. Starting with the easy part, there's a big power supply over here. That's what this transformer is, and looks like we got some linear regulators with some big smoothing caps just to supply the DC voltage that's necessary for everything. It's a pretty low power device, so they can get away with these kind of linear 7805s or whatever. Right next to that, we have all this analog madness, and this is going to be the internal modem, so that way you can just plug this thing directly into the wall. And you can see it does look very different from the rest of the PCB here, which is all just pretty much standard 7400 series logic chips. But the stuff that got me most excited about it are these 3 ICs right here. These are TMS 1000s and a TMS 1300. These three are all from the same family, and this is what Texas Instruments calls the one-chip microcomputer. They are 4-bit based, so it has a 4-bit data bus internally, and it has the ALU and working registers and all the things that come with making a central processing unit, but it also contains a mask ROM as well as RAM. And essentially that just makes it a microcontroller, but it's like a one-time programmable microcontroller. I find these absolutely fascinating because you don't come across 4-bit CPUs all that often, but these TMS 1000s were used in a ton of devices, and we just don't realize it. I mean, they were used in the speech synthesizer for the TI-99, the Speak and Spell. They were used in the TI-2500 data math and most of the TI calculators of that era. They were just incredibly useful. And the TMS 1000, these two chips here on the left, have 1024 by 8 bits of read-only memory, and then they have 64 by 4 bits of random access memory. The bigger TMS 1300 here doubles that. So you've got 2 kilobytes of read-only memory and 128 by 4 bits of random access memory. But also notably, the TMS 1300 here increases the number of individually addressed output latches from 11 to 16. So these are what we would consider kind of GPIO. So that allows it to do things like potentially handle the keyboard matrix here. So they've got 3 of these in here. Each of them is probably doing something dramatically different, like handling the keyboard matrix, handling communications, and then maybe input and output, and who knows, but it's all right in here. And that's really cool. Everything else is just kind of supporting circuitry for these 3 chips. That's really awesome. So I think it's time that we get this thing back together and power it up and see what happens. There we go, all back together. We'll go ahead and flip the power switch on here, and while the CRT warms up, it's worth noting that I didn't do any repairs or cleaning to this data terminal. Boxcar Jim just took really amazing care of it. And there you go, you can see that we have a flashing cursor up there, so let's go ahead and try to type something. We'll do Hellorld exclamation point. Hellorld, we have it in half duplex, so everything we type is being looped back. If we hit return, that does a carriage return back to the first character, and then we have to do a line feed to go to the next line. And let's just test every key on here. We'll do the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And it looks like the keyboard is working perfectly. I mean, I would expect it to be. It's a really well cared for terminal, and it's mechanical, so there's no foam to deteriorate in this. But a data terminal in and of itself isn't a computer. It's just a way to communicate with computers. So we need to plug this into a real deal machine to actually see it do what it's supposed to do. Now, the proper way to test this little TI terminal would be to take it all the way inside and connect it up to a phone line and have it remote connect to a modem connected up to my big boy Centurion here, which would be the large system at the office, but I don't have any of the necessary stuff to do that yet. Maybe that's something I want to try to explore in the future, and I know just the right people to talk to about that. Avery, if you're watching, I may have to lean on your expertise in the future to try and figure out how to get some telephone shenanigans going on. But for today, we're just going to connect a RS-232 cable from this terminal into the Centurion computer here. And you can see it is fully spun up. It is ready to go. We're into the status menu here, and I've already got 2 data terminals set up on it. CRT0, which is the primary terminal here, and CRT1, which is the EDS terminal over here, running Procom Plus, acting as a data terminal. And everything seems to be working with the exception of the fixed platter on our second Hawk drive. It's still giving me grief, so that's something we're gonna have to look at in the future. And here on CRT1, you can see that our fixed platter of our second Hawk drive is not showing up correctly, but we've got total system RAM of 240K here. We've got CRT0, CRT1. Let's do a .sta to refresh this screen, see what happens. And okay, our fixed platter decided to come back to life. Can we read it? .dir3? Yeah, we can read it. All right, I have no idea what's going on with this fixed platter on the Hawk here. It works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. And back over here on the primary terminal, you can see we've got CRT0, CRT1. I want to get CRT2 set up as that TI Insights series terminal, but the Centurion defaults to 9607E1, and that terminal only works at 308N1. So I wrote a little script that I call MuxGen. So we'll go ahead and run that. And it's going to say mux baud rate setup program. What is the number of data bits? We want that to be 8. It says, is there odd, even, or no parity? We're going to say no parity. The number of stop bits is 1. And the baud rate is 300. And finally, we want to set that up on CRT 2. And it runs a little script for us, and that should be set up ready to go. So all we should have to do now on the TI Insight is hit Control-C, and yeah, there we go, CRT2 ready. Oh man, let's type something. Let's do a .sta. Oh, that's interesting. Everything is duplicating. So I need to flip the switch on the back to change it from half duplex to full duplex. Let's go ahead and do a return on that, and we'll get our status display here. And this is gonna take a while because 300 baud is incredibly slow. And also we're seeing kind of the first problem of having a 40 column wide display on something like the Centurion, which was built around an 80 column display. So we're getting this status screen looks all sorts of broken and not right because it's wrapping around each line. And so this is one of those situations where the Centurion is actually too smart for this particular data terminal. But you can see it actually does work. If I do a .dir1, we can see that with the switch in the correct place, we're not getting duplicated characters now. I can hit a return, and we get a directory listing off of the Hawk drive that's down there. That's awesome. It all seems to be working perfectly. The data here is just slightly longer than 40 characters wide, so we're getting an extra space between them, but that is fully 100% usable. And I think depending on which application software you're trying to run, you could get away with using one of these from home. So there it is, the most adorable little data terminal, fully functioning and hooked up to the Centurion, acting as a remote data terminal for it. And despite the questionable usefulness of a 40 column terminal on the big boy Centurion here, I do think I'm going to keep this terminal as a permanent fixture in the room simply because it is so cute. It's a bit of that Marie Kondo philosophy of if you pick it up and hold something and it brings you joy, then keep it. And well, that little guy definitely brings me joy. So Boxcar Jim, thank you so much for donating this to the channel. I absolutely love it. And I want to thank you all so much for hanging out with me today while I'm getting over whatever ailment it is that I have. And I hope to see you in the next episode.